I was halfway through pumping gas when I noticed a man watching me from inside the dark store. He had not moved in over a minute, and somehow he was closer every time I blinked. If you have ever stopped for gas at night, you need to hear the 3 true encounters I am about to tell, because after this, you will never look at a gas station the same way again. Story 1. The Man in the Black Hoodie. I had just finished a 10-hour shift at the diner, my feet sore and my uniform smelling like coffee. The highway home stretched empty and dark. A black ribbon with broken white lines pulsing under my headlights. A low ceiling of clouds hid the moon. The air felt heavy and wet, the kind that swallows distant sounds when a faded neon sign appeared ahead, buzzing and missing letters. I felt equal parts relief and unease. The station had one lonely pump under a flickering canopy light, the store a glass box with aisles that looked frozen. There were no other cars. But the pump screen was already awake, glowing like it had been waiting specifically for me. I slid my card, selected regular, and the hose shivered as fuel began its slow rush. The numbers climbed and the hum of the motor sounded too loud, like a whisper amplified inside a church. Through the glass door I saw him, a man in a black hoodie, his back to me, shoulders hunched and still. He stood in the snack aisle without browsing, without shifting his weight. A shape placed on the floor like a heavy shadow. I told myself he was deciding between chips and jerky. I told myself I was tired and seeing patterns in stillness. Then the fluorescent lights blinked once, and for an instant it looked like his feet were pointed toward the door, not the shelf. The pump clicked finished. The sudden silence pressed against my ears. The canopy buzz turned strangely personal, though I had already paid. I felt drawn to go inside, maybe for coffee, maybe for company, maybe to prove he was ordinary. The automatic door hissed, the bell chimed weakly. The air smelled like old sugar and motor oil and yesterday's mop water. He was still there in the same square of tile, his hood cords dangling perfectly still, his breathing invisible in the cold light. "Hey, you okay?" I asked, my voice sounding too bright. Like a coin dropped on concrete at night, he turned his head slowly, the motion careful and stiff, as if he had not used his neck in a very long time. His face looked pale in a way that felt interior, eyes wide and glassy, mouth slightly open like a word had stalled. He did not answer, he simply watched me, not curious, not hostile, just present in a way that felt like a pressure. From the counter, the attendant spoke, his tone flat and fast. "Your total is $23.50. I flinched because I had not told him my pump number. I had not chosen anything. I had barely crossed the threshold. I turned toward the register, a laminated name tag tilted, a magazine open to a lake scene under the clerk's hands. I looked back to the aisle for balance, for proof, for anything normal, and the man in the hoodie was gone. The bell had not chimed again. The door had not moved. There were no footsteps, no rustle of fabric. Only empty tile. The hum of the coolers climbed a pitch. The fluorescent tubes vibrated. My skin prickled like I had stepped into static. I walked to the counter because leaving meant turning my back to the glass. The attendant avoided my eyes, slid a receipt toward me, and tapped it with one dry finger like a metronome. "Someone else was just here, right?" I asked, shaping the words casual, hearing them land heavy. He said no too quickly, then yes as if trying the other answer on. Then he said sometimes he comes and stands. Sometimes he does not come and still stands, he added, looking past me. Like the idea had weight and needed shelf space, I asked who. He shrugged in a small, tight way, then said, "Keep your eyes on the glass when you leave, not the columns." I did not ask why. The question felt like a key I did not want to turn. I folded the receipt, the paper warm from his hand, and walked back toward the door, trading curiosity for momentum. Outside, the lot looked bigger than before. The night felt wider. The concrete felt like a blank page. In the door's reflection, I saw myself small under the canopy, and behind me, farther out by the dark road, I saw him. The man in the hoodie stood where the light thinned, facing me, not moving, not breathing, just occupying distance. I kept my eyes on the glass like I was told, resisting the animal urge to pivot and measure him with my neck. He lifted one hand in a motion that was almost a wave and almost a warning, the wrist bending slow like a thin branch. The canopy lights flickered twice hard, throwing short shadows that did not match the objects that made them. In that stutter, he vanished from the reflection. The empty dark swallowed the spot where he had been a second before. I walked to my car without checking my side, counting my steps, listening for cloth, listening for breath, listening for anything. The doorbell chirped behind me, though no one entered, a sound that traveled farther than it should have. My keys felt slick. The ignition teeth missed and scraped. The engine caught on the second try with a rough cough. I looked only at the windshield, using the glass to track shapes instead of turning my head. He was there again in the reflection, not by the road now, but near the ice chest against the wall, motionless and angled toward me. I put the car in gear and rolled forward. The gravel at the lot edge popped like small bones. The store window showed the aisles behind the counter, stretched longer than they should be. The perspective wrong and rubbery. In the rearview mirror, the station shrank. The canopy became a bright bruise in the dark, just before the building dropped out of view. Something crossed the glass door, a figure moving with joints arranged wrong. I drove in silence. No music, no radio, hands tight on the wheel, eyes wide enough to ache. The highway returned to its rhythm, the broken lines counting like a slow metronome, the clouds moving without wind. At my apartment, I left the engine running until I convinced myself I would turn it off. Inside, I kept a lamp on, not because light wins, but because darkness felt like an invitation I could not decline politely. Morning brought courage the way it sometimes does, thin and practical and useful. I checked my pockets and found the receipt. The ink streaked like someone had brushed it while wet. On the back in soft pencil, letters small and careful. A sentence waited. "Do not let him stand behind you again." The graphite smudged. The message heavy as a coin in a shallow pocket. For days I changed routes, fueled before dusk, kept a thermos to avoid midnight coffee. Still, a week later, I found myself low on gas near the same stretch of highway I had promised to avoid. The sign with missing letters appeared. The canopy jittered like it had a heartbeat. The pump screens glowed ready. I did not stop. I slowed to look, and in the mirror I saw a figure step from the ice chest shadow and turn toward the road. He did not raise a hand this time. He did not wave. He simply stood. The canopy lights flickered twice, steadied, and I pressed the accelerator as if denying an invitation could be a physical act. Back home, I tucked the pencil note behind my driver's license. I told no one, not because I feared sounding foolish, but because speaking felt like drawing his outline with my mouth. A few nights later, the diner was slow, the radio low, and a man in a black hoodie sat at the counter without removing his hood. He ordered coffee, never lifted the cup, stared at the napkin dispenser with a patience that made me forget to breathe. When he left, he tucked a folded slip under the saucer, a receipt from a gas station without totals, without line items. On the back, the same careful pencil letters repeated, "Do not let him stand behind you again." The graphite fresher, the advice colder. That night, I parked under a streetlight and watched my living room through the open curtains, like it belonged to someone I was paid to protect. I set my phone on a tripod, pointed at the couch, and hit record at 310, not to prove anything, but to teach myself a ritual. In the morning, the video showed an empty room with air that felt busy. Nothing moved, nothing spoke, yet the space felt like a chest after a long run, full of breath, unsure what to do next. I kept the slip in my wallet and the habit in my bones. At stations, I look in glass. Not at columns. I pay quickly. I leave before curiosity finishes tying its shoes, if you ask what he wants. I can only say some things want to be noticed, and some things want you to notice that you notice them. I decided not to give him either. I decided to leave the distance between us measured in reflections I do not step into. And if you ever see someone standing impossibly still under a canopy that buzzes like a trapped insect, keep your eyes on the glass, keep your keys ready, and do not let him stand behind you again. Story 2. The payphone call. It was the first week after my move. The boxes still unopened, the roads unfamiliar, the sky a cold blank sheet above the highway. I was alone in a rental truck that rattled with every seam in the asphalt. The radio between stations, the dashboard clock too bright for midnight. The gaslight winked once, then stayed on, the soft chime sounding like a polite threat I could not afford to ignore. A sign promised fuel at the next exit, a faded arrow leaning toward a dark field, a smaller word below that read open. When I rolled off the ramp, the world felt farther from town, the trees pressed close, the air colder, the silence held like a breath. The station sat by itself with the canopy lights tinted yellow, a diseased kind of glow that made the concrete look like old parchment. There were no other cars, no movement in the windows, only a payphone near the road, its booth glass filmed with grime and finger streaks. I pulled beside the outer pump and killed the engine, the sudden quiet swallowing the last of the fan noise like a door closing. My card slid in with a tired beep, the nozzle locked into place, the numbers started climbing with a steady, patient certainty. Halfway through the fill, a sound cut the lot in two, a bright bell tone that did not belong to anything I could see. I turned and saw the payphone, tiny in the dark, the receiver crooked, the metal casing scarred and dull as bone. The bell rang again, sharper, closer, the kind of sound your ears decide is aimed directly at your name. I checked the store door for a clerk who might wave me off, but the glass reflected only my jacket and the stuttering canopy lights. The phone rang a third time, then a fourth, the interval tightening as if it were measuring my hesitation. I left the pump running and walked toward the booth, my steps loud on the concrete, my breath white in the sickly light. The receiver felt heavier than it should have, the plastic shockingly cold, the coiled cord stretched and still slightly sticky. "Hello," I said, the booth catching my voice and handing it back to me thinner and less certain than when it left my mouth. For a second, there was only the quiet of a dead line, then a whisper slid in so close I flinched from the empty glass. "You are not supposed to be here," the voice said, each word shaped like a warning that had been practiced too many times. "Who is this?" I asked, and my breath fogged the glass, and a distant truck moaned on the highway like an animal that had learned vowels. "Do not go inside," the whisper said. "Do not let him ask you to help. Do not let him walk behind you." The line crackled, a small electrical shiver, like someone dragging foil across teeth, then settled into a hush that felt like listening. I turned toward my truck and saw in the booth's reflection a tall shape by the pump, angled toward my driver's door, perfectly still. I spun around and the pump island was empty, the nozzle locked, the numbers still counting, the wind stirring nothing at all. The whisper lowered like a hand on my shoulder. "Get into the truck. Do not look at me when you leave. Do not look at the store door." I set the receiver back and missed the cradle by a little. The bell clanged once. The phone swayed. The cord twisted like a snake. At the pump, the screen blinked paid and thanked me with a cheerful font that felt like a joke told at a funeral. I climbed into the cab and locked both doors. The heavy clack too loud in the small air. My fingers clumsy on the keys. The mirrors showed only the lot and my own lights, and a strip of road looked more like a river than a street. When I shifted into drive, the payphone rang again, the bell faster now, the cadence urgent enough to trip my heartbeat. I left anyway, the truck rumbling as it rolled, the booth sliding past my window like an aquarium where something had learned to speak. At the edge of the lot, the bell changed tone, brighter, nearer, as if the receiver had been raised in a hand I could not see. I kept my eyes on the road, the yellow lines slick with frost, the darkness piled thick just beyond the reach of the headlights. Only when the station shrank to a bruise of light in the mirror did the ringing thin out, becoming a memory that still cut. 20 miles later, I pulled into a rest area, rich with vending machines and humming bathrooms, the living world returning like a weak tide. When I opened the door of the truck, a small metal disc fell from the handle and landed on my shoe with a soft, decisive tap. It was a payphone token, blank-faced, no number, no emblem, the weight of a promise you did not agree to carry. I set it on the dash and it slid a little, then stopped with a stubborn cling, as if the plastic beneath it had grown a magnet. That night I slept poorly in an apartment that still smelled like cardboard. The token on the counter, the silence owning more rooms than I did. In the morning, my phone logs showed a missed call at 113 from a number not found. The location label reading roadside emergency, unknown. I deleted the entry and it returned after the next reboot, the time the same, the words the same, the screen a dull mirror for my own frown. A week passed, routes learned, shortcuts memorized, until another late shift left me hungry and low on fuel near a town with more dogs than people. I found a different station with bright white light and a coffee chain logo, traffic in and out, a cop car dozing beside the air pump. When I lifted the nozzle and squeezed the handle, the pump hummed a note that carried an echo, and beneath it, faint, a bell counted 3 times. I told myself it was the register inside opening, metal on metal, coins in a tray, the old brain begging for explanations with sharp edges sanded off. The bell came again, clearer, closer, and I turned without meaning to, expecting glass doors and warm light and another human body. Across the far edge of the lot stood a payphone that had not been there when I pulled in, the booth clean, the metal bright, the receiver perfectly centered. A teenager walked by it, chewing fries, and never looked once. A man in a reflective vest passed close and tucked his hands deeper into his pockets. The phone rang and no one flinched, the bell brighter than the store's music, the booth shining slightly like it had taken a breath. I put the nozzle back in its cradle mid-fill, grabbed a coffee I did not want, threw cash on the counter, and left without counting change. 3 exits later, I pulled off onto a shoulder to stop shaking, the truck ticking as it cooled, the coffee having gone to cardboard in my mouth. When I opened the glove box for napkins, the token slid forward on its own and touched my palm with a tap that felt deliberate and small. That night, I taped the token inside the cabinet by the sink, facing the wall, a punishment or a ritual. I could not tell which, just a boundary I could perform. I started keeping receipts in a neat row in the visor, dates and times like fence posts, proof that I had been where I said I had been. 2 weeks later, a late storm scrubbed the sky clean, and I found myself on a long state road with nothing but fence and field and an appetite for sleep. My map app died precisely where the last bar died, the road offering no turnouts, only a thin shoulder and a patience that felt like malice. The sign for gas appeared with the same faded arrow as before, the word open leaning like it had a secret it wanted me to overhear. The lot had the same yellow light, the same milky windows, the same lopsided trash can, the booth near the road dark and quiet like a mouth shut against bad news. I parked by the pump and reminded myself that superstition is a poor safety plan, that fuel is fuel, that doors are doors if you do not let them be mouths. I had just seated the nozzle when the bell began again, one bright chime, then another, the second stepping on the first like a child who cannot wait. The receiver lay crooked, the cord twisted, the little metal shelf beneath it dotted with burn marks like a code someone had tried to erase. I walked to the booth, the concrete holding a chill I felt in my knees, the air smelling faintly of hot dust and stale paper. I lifted the receiver and said nothing, letting the line decide whether I existed, letting the silence climb into my ear like a vine. The whisper returned immediately, softer, breathier, like it had been waiting in the wire with its eyes closed. Do not let him bring you into the back. Who is he? I asked, and the word back echoed in the booth glass, the echo slightly late, as if the word had to climb stairs to follow. The clerk, the voice replied, the one who smiles too slowly, the one who says the cooler door sticks, the one who knows your name without asking. Through the booth glass, I saw the store counter, empty at first, then occupied by a man in a hat whose brim cast a shadow deeper than the room around it. He waved, not friendly, not unfriendly, just the motion of a person who has learned that hands persuade faster than sentences. I said I am leaving, and the whisper breathed yes, and then it added please, and then it added do not let me hear you go inside. I set the receiver down and it clattered wildly. The bell chimed once in protest. The cord swayed and then went perfectly still. At the pump, the screen had already printed a receipt I had not asked for. The paper curled. Like a little tongue, the ink reading paid in a font that smiled too wide. I climbed into the truck and kept my eyes forward, the clerk now at the door pushing it open with one knuckle like a man testing bathwater. He stepped into the wash of the canopy light, and his shadow fell the wrong way, not long but wide, not soft, but with corners. He said something I could not hear and gestured toward the back of the store with his thumb. an old invitation wrapped like a favor. I put the truck in gear and moved, the engine voicing its complaint, the tires rolling over fine gravel that popped like dry seeds under heat. When the road took me, the bell rang again, far behind me. And somehow right at my ear, a last small tug, a fish testing a line it has already escaped. I drove until the dark looked like space and the stars looked like nails, then found a crowded station and stood under clean light with other people who smelled like coffee and rain. I asked the clerk there if anyone still serviced payphones, and he laughed in the gentle way people laugh when they think you are making art out of boredom. At home, I took the token from the cabinet and sealed it in a zip bag, not for preservation, but to promise myself I would not touch it by accident. I wrote on an index card, "Do not answer when the bell is not attached to a person," and slid it behind a visor with the neat row of receipts. Weeks later, in a different town, at a different hour, I fueled up beside a mural and a dog tied to a post and two teenagers filming each other on a phone. Across the street, a booth appeared where there had been only a newspaper box, the frame bright, the glass clean, the sun hitting it at an angle that made my eyes water. No one else seemed to see it. The dog looked past it. The teenagers danced in front of it without casting reflections on the glass. The bell did not ring that time, but the door of the booth stood open as if the phone inside had lost patience with doors. I left slowly, and as I turned the corner, the side mirror held the booth for the length of a heartbeat, then let it drop out of the world like a stone into deep water. Now, when I travel, I count my steps between the pump and the cab. I keep my name off the counter. I let the receipts prove the only parts of me that need proving. If a phone calls me from a place where no hand is visible, I let it talk to the air until the air answers, because the air is brave and I am busy. If someone behind glass already knows my name, I leave my questions in the lot and let the truck carry me into a night that does not ring. And if you ever hear a bell singing your hesitation into shape, remember what the whisper said. Do not go inside. Do not let him walk behind you. Do not let the door decide who you are. Story 3. The Woman in the Freezer Aisle. I had been driving deliveries since sunset, the highway unspooling in dark lanes that felt older than the map. The cargo was simple and forgettable. Belts and filters and boxes that thumped softly at each expansion joint. The fuel light blinked twice and stayed, a patient orange warning that always wins the argument. When a lonely station appeared ahead, its canopy buzzed with a thin insect sound that made the hood vibrate. Only one other vehicle was there, an old pickup tucked against the sidewall like a dog asleep by a porch. The store's glass showed aisles lit too bright and a coffee machine steaming as if someone had just walked away. I slid my card and started fueling. The numbers moved like a slow clock, counting a different kind of time. The night air smelled faintly of antifreeze and sugar, a sweetness that did not belong to anything alive. Inside, the bell over the door chimed thin and careful, a sound that seemed to check my name against a list. The clerk was not at the counter, only a magazine open to a lake and a pen resting like a sleeping insect. That was when I noticed her, standing at the end of the freezer aisle with her face turned toward the glass, a pale dress falling to mid-calf, bare feet set square on tile that looked too clean to ever warm. Her hair hung straight and dark. It covered most of her cheeks, refusing the air that moved every paper strip near the vents. She did not browse. She did not breathe in a way I could see. She only occupied the aisle like a misplaced piece of weather. I walked halfway down for coffee and found myself drifting right, as if the cold was a hand on my shoulder. Through the freezer door I saw my reflection, and behind my reflection I saw her eyes, pale and certain and level, her right hand lifted and pressed flat to the glass, a gentle placement that still made a bright fog bloom. The circle stayed, steady and wet-edged. The kind of fog only skin can make, the kind that refuses quick explanations. "Do you need help?" I asked, my voice choosing softness because sharpness felt like breaking something important. Her lips parted a little, not to show teeth, only to mark a word that never arrived in the room. From the back a beige door clicked and the clerk emerged. Stocky and tired, sweatshirt cracked with a local team logo. He nodded past me as if acknowledging a regular, then stacked a milk crate on the counter with quiet hands. "Long night," he said without asking. "Potholes east will rattle the bolts loose. Coffee is fresh if you like it strong." I poured a cup and watched the reflection instead of the aisle, my hand steady because my eyes were doing all the shaking. She had not moved in the glass, but the fog circle widened as if a second hand had joined the first just out of view. I closed my eyes one heartbeat and opened them to find the circle thinning, the message receding like breath taken back. The clerk rang my fuel without asking a pump number, the receipt printed with a thin line that read, "Keep your face toward the warm air." I did not ask him about it. The sentence felt like a sign on a door I had already stepped through. Back at the aisle, I noticed small scratches on the inside edge of the freezer frame, clustered in groups that refused counting. The handle was colder than the others, cold that bit alive, cold that remembered hands, cold that made the rubber squeak when moved. I pulled the door a finger's width. The interior bulbs flared, the air rolled out smooth, and the mirror at the back bent the room wrong. My shoulder appeared without my head. The ceiling returned too short. The aisle in glass seemed longer than the store I stood inside. I let the door settle, gasket kissing metal with a soft decision. Then I stepped back until the cold relaxed its hold. In the reflection, she leaned closer to where I had been, her breath not visible, her attention a steady pressure against the pane. "Do not mirror me," a whisper said from just behind my ear, the words clear and weightless and impossible to dismiss. I kept my eyes in the glass and let my arms hang, refusing the shape my muscles had started to copy without permission. The clerk cleared his throat and tapped the counter once, a knuckle knocking wood to test for hollowness. "Some nights are busier than they look," he said, "and sometimes the ice machine thinks it is the moon, so it pulls the tides wrong." I smiled without teeth and lifted the coffee. I told him I would head out, the road still wanting miles from me. He nodded and slid a second receipt across, the same line printed again, "Keep your face toward the warm air," as if receipts could be prayers. At the door, I used the glass to check the aisle without turning, letting the station teach me how to look. The freezer lights flickered once, not failing, only thinking, and a pale oval hovered where her face would be if mirrors told the truth. Outside, the canopy hummed and the pickup's side window wore a smear of condensation shaped like a palm. I fueled the last dollars and set the nozzle home. The machine beeped polite and final like a hospital monitor between alarms. In the truck, I watched a storefront in my windshield, a faint mirror where red taillights would soon lie and stretch. The freezer aisle brightened a fraction and then returned to even, like a breath taken and released by a careful patient. I rolled to the lot exit with my turn signal on, a ritual that made my choice official in a place without witnesses. The bell chimed inside just once, though no one entered, and my rear view caught the aisle elongated as if pulled by a tide. At the last angle, where glass could still see me, the pale oval grew, and a single fingertip print vanished. The canopy lost a note, then found it, the buzz completing a chord I did not want to learn by heart. I put distance between us the way a tow rope builds slack after a hill, careful and steady and without hurry. The smell of vanilla and Freon rode with me for a mile, then thinned until only the idea of it remained at the edge of thought. At the receiving bay, the shop owner signed for the boxes and commented on storms. When I circled the truck, I saw a round patch of fog on the passenger window, exactly palm-sized, perfectly centered, perfectly gone when I blinked. Back home, I wrote a small note and slid it into the visor where I keep spare toll money and stubborn promises. Face the warmth, no mirrors at midnight, keep moving. 3 lines I could read with my fingers on the worst nights. A week later, I stopped at a different station at noon. Modern and bright and openly alive, I still watch the freezers in reflection only, a courtesy to whatever keeps the rules of cold. The clerk had taped a paper under the security sign that read, "Be kind to the night shift. Someone loves them." I took my receipt and felt grateful for ordinary ink, ordinary totals, and a closing instruction that looked exactly like change. If you want to know what she wanted, want is the wrong verb. Presence does not want. It simply arranges the air. And it teaches you which way to face if you are willing to learn. Now when light buzzes wrong and the glass pulls at my eyes, I practice the rule that saved me. I keep my face toward the warm air. I let cold be storage and not a mirror. And I leave when leaving is still easy. And if you ever see a pale shape in a freezer door late at night, do not match its stillness. Let your arms hang, let your breath stay yours, and walk away before the glass learns your name too well. Gas stations after midnight are not just places to buy fuel. They are thresholds. They watch you back. They remember your shape. They prefer you when you forget the rules. If you must stop, keep your eyes in the safest glass and your keys ready to leave. Do not follow voices into back rooms. Do not mirror the cold. Do not let anyone stand behind you again. Because under those buzzing lights, the ordinary can open like a trap, and the thing waiting there is not waiting for gas, it is waiting for you to hesitate. If you see someone watching from inside a dark store, keep driving. And if a phone rings with no one around to answer, let it ring until the night answers for itself.